Well, hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm glad you're here. So I'm getting ready to play my first ever game of Warhammer 40k 2nd edition, and this is a goal that has been in the works for I guess going on 3 decades now. I distinctly remember sitting on the sofa sometime during the summer of 1995 and ordering an Imperial Guard Codex and some Talarn figures from Games Workshop mail order with the intent of playing the new edition of 40k, which is what it was at the time. But never got everything painted up, never got that stuff on the table, and never played it. So hopefully I can start rectifying that right now. And if it's not a total disaster, especially on our smaller table here, I will try to share some of those results in the form of battle reports here on the channel. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, in the process of getting everything ready, I pulled my incomplete collection of 2nd edition codices off the shelf and then posted a pic of some of them on our channel community page. And I have to admit that I was somewhat surprised at the overwhelmingly positive response, not only to 2nd edition in general, but also to the Codex cover art from that era, which comprised a time period of from 1993 to 1998 or so. So roughly 5 years, 5 glorious years that people still remember quite fondly. Anyway, I thought, since people seem to be interested, and just for the heck of it, why don't we look at some of that vintage cover art, at least for the 2nd edition codices I have. Maybe compare it to some of the codices that preceded or followed them, again depending on what I have, and perhaps speculate wildly about how warhammering evolved during the mid-1990s through the mid-2000s or so. So if that sounds good, let's hit it. To begin, and to kind of set the baseline for the discussion, let's first look at the iconic Warhammer 40k illustration by John Sibic, which was used for both the cover of Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader in 1987 and the cover of the Warhammer 40k 2nd edition rulebook in 1993. If there's one illustration that encapsulates what early 40k was all about, this is it. Humanity's toughest warriors, the Space Marines, making a desperate last stand on some war-torn planet on the far side of Imperial space. Interestingly, though, while this illustration isn't overly graphic, it is not afraid to show wounded, dead, or dying Space Marines. Also, the ubiquitous decorative skulls, while they are present, are small in size and few in number. When we look at the 1993 2nd edition Codex Imperialis, however, which is basically an abbreviated faction book which was included in the starter set, and which features cover art from the incomparable John Blanche, we see lots of skulls. Also, the image looks much more like a comic book with bright, bold colors and exaggerated poses, and while there's a lot of shooting going on, it doesn't really appear that anyone's dead or dying. They're all just gleefully blasting away. So it's a lot less grim than the original John Sibic illustration, and I think that sort of sets the tone for the next several Codex covers. Moving forward in time, here is the 1994 Warhammer 40k Codex Space Wolves and the 1995 Necromunda rulebook, both featuring cover art by Geoff Taylor. These are both really vibrant comic book style action scenes with larger-than-life characters, fantastical sci-fi settings, and blazing guns that aren't really aimed at anyone in the frame. Any casualties are tastefully hidden from view. I appreciate the multitude of small details in this illustration, the badges, the runes, the wolf tails, even the tiny, tiny battle playing out in the background. It's pretty darn amazing, really. Here are 2 more amazing Codex covers from Geoff Taylor, the 1994 2nd edition Eldar Codex and the 1999 3rd edition Eldar Codex. It's my personal opinion that the illustration for the 2nd edition Eldar Codex has got to be on the short list for one of the greatest 40k illustrations of all time, even if it doesn't represent the gothic, dystopian, grimdark style that modern 40k is known for. It's just simply a dynamic, heroic piece of sci-fi art with brilliant colors that leap off the page. But let's be honest though, it also looks kind of like a comic book or a cereal box or a candy wrapper. It's just that vibrant. And while it's definitely eye-catching, I can see how it might not appeal to some folks who prefer gritty, dark, and gothic. So by the time we get to the 1999 3rd edition Eldar Codex, featuring another awesome illustration by Geoff Taylor, we still get bright colors, but they are combined with lots of shadow now, so that the subjects appear to be gleaming in the darkness rather than standing in full illumination. Also, the main Eldar character here seems to have a sharper edge to him and appears significantly more menacing and less heroic than the Eldar in the 1994 Codex. David Gallagher created the cover art for both the 1995 Imperial Guard Codex and the 1999 Imperial Guard Codex. On the 1995 cover, the Catachan Guardsmen are resplendent in their bright red headbands and are fully illuminated, while the filthy Cadians on the 1999 cover, just 4 years later, are bathed in shadow, appear to have been dipped in brown wash, and are standing amidst the horrors of war. It's really kind of interesting because the same artist created both illustrations and the covers were published only 4 years apart, but the tone is completely different. So you can see how the Warhammer 40k aesthetic was rapidly shifting from light to dark between these second and third editions. Okay, so here's the classic 1988 Realm of Chaos Slaves to Darkness cover art by John Sibbick on the left, and the 1996 Codex Chaos cover art on the right by the prolific David Gallagher. All I really have to say about this is when GW was a small fringe company selling games to sci-fi and fantasy nerds, being a little bit edgy was probably a feature and not a bug. But then when they pivoted toward the mainstream in the 1990s, obviously somebody in management decided to dial back the demonic imagery, because the Chaos Lord on the 1996 Codex looks more like a rock opera supervillain than a servant of the ruinous powers. Also skulls, skulls, skulls. Here we have the 1997 Sisters of Battle Codex on the left, featuring iconic cover art by John Blanche. Since Warhammer 40k 3rd edition was released in 1998, this codex arrives sort of at the tail end of 2nd edition. Then on the right we have the frankly disturbing 2003 Witch Hunters Codex with somewhat grislier cover art by Paul Dainton. This codex was released just before the debut of Warhammer 40k 4th edition in 2004. The cover of the 1997 Codex is a genre-defining piece of Warhammer 40k art that not only embraces both the vibrant colors of the earlier codices, but also leans into the gothic imagery that would be a staple of Warhammer 40k moving forward. And it forever defines the Sisters of Battle. I mean, you have a militant space nun dominatrix standing atop a literal mountain of skulls. There is no way GW could ever walk that back. I'd also like to acknowledge the very Mordheim-esque characters crowded into the right side of the image, because of course John Blanche was one of the illustrators who worked on Mordheim, which would be released 2 years later in 1999. The 2003 Witch Hunters Codex, however, is tonally very different than the 1997 Sisters of Battle Codex, focusing more on the macabre work of the Inquisition and somewhat less on the exploits of the heroic space nuns. And while there are certainly some fantastic illustrations in this book, it also features some disturbing religious and body horror imagery that I personally think is a bridge too far, especially for a game book. So I'm unsure why GW felt they needed to push the boundaries of good taste heading into 4th edition. Maybe they were trying to erase all memory of the previous decade's wholesome, candy-colored codices and reframe the 40k universe as a gritty, grimdark, dystopian hellscape without a shred of joy or hope. That's my wild speculation anyway. Let me know what you think in the comments. Okay folks, that's our brief look at some classic 2nd edition Codex cover art. If you have a favorite 40k Codex illustration, please tell us all about it. Thank you as always for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Stay frosty. We'll see you next time.